Do you like books? I mean, really, really like books? Then you're in the right place. Each week, your host, Sam Hankin, interviews the best of today's top-selling authors and the up-and-coming superstars of modern literature. This is The Avid Reader. Here is your host, Sam Hankin.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of The Avid Reader, brought to you by Wellington Square Bookshop. Today, our guest is Erica Buist, whose book, This Party's Dead: Grief, Joy, and Spilled Rum at the World's Death Festivals, is published by Unbound in February in the UK and more recently here in the States. Erica was hired as a staff writer at The Guardian, as I was saying to her earlier, one of the few places that Americans can still get real news. She was hired in 2013, has been freelancing for them ever since. And if you go onto her site, you can find a lot of stuff that she's written, and also on YouTube too. So, hi, Erica. Let's talk about your book.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, because I own a bookstore, this is always important to me. Let's talk about the cover, which is great, by Jose Posada.
Yeah. It's, they did an amazing job. That was really fun. I remember my publisher sent me the cover, and the editor said, "Oh yeah, so they took cartoons from Jose Guadalupe Posada. Do you know that cartoonist?" I was like, that cartoonist is mentioned in the book, so it was just so perfect. I didn't want to look at any other covers. That was it for me. So
that's a good one. But how do you rate a gold foil tooth for your first book? No authors get gold foil for their first book.
Did they not? I had no idea.
No. You didn't get deckled edges, but you did get a gold tooth, which, it's impressive. And I always say this every time, people say you can't judge a book by its cover, but everyone who comes to the bookstore.
Everybody does, yeah.
Yeah, the car. And then the next thing I think about is epigraphs, and yours is, did you write it? It's you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I thought, well, maybe it's somebody else. I'll find out who it is, and I'll sound cool knowing who it is. But it's you say love is not a reward and death is not a punishment. If you were taught they were, this book's for you. So if you Google that, you know what you come up with as the first result?
What?
Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis.
What? Wait, what? What came up? Oh my God. I don't think I've ever read any C.S. Lewis except maybe The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when I was like 9.
Well, that's the thing. It's Mere Christianity. I'm not a Christian, but it's a great book. And the other book that you should read is called A Grief Observed, about the death of his wife, Joy. And whenever, how you talk about, how you quote George Carlin about, people say, if there's anything I can do, which, you can do something, bring back my husband. That's pretty much all you can do.
Yeah.
So it's like, so the one thing I do when someone who I know has someone who died is I give them that book. I just put it on their desk or their living room table. And that's the only thing I do, always. Yeah. You'll note that I talk most of the time in these interviews. So just—
That's fine, that's quite relaxing.
But we're trying to sell your book. So, all right, so let's start with Chris and Dion. And I wouldn't say this other than the fact that you said it in the beginning, is that here's a guy who may or may not be your future father-in-law, and he dies. And you say, what am I supposed to do? Because is this a big deal or is it not?
Yeah, well, it was definitely a big deal to me. But I'm not sure why I did this, but I suddenly stepped back and I was searching in society for the rules of whether it was appropriate for me to be destroyed by it, because I guess we all kind of revert back to the traditional ideas when it comes to grief. Like, do I have a right to be upset about this? And, a couple of people asked, where did that come from? You go, everywhere? Like you hear people saying like, oh my God. And she was like, I've heard someone tell a story about like, this woman, she was like crying at his funeral. She was like sobbing, like she didn't even know him. This strange idea that someone's trying to steal your grief, like grief is pie, like there's not enough to go around. But I fell right into that. But, I think I'm far enough away from it now to admit that it's possible I was looking for an excuse not to do the work, because grieving is work. So yeah, so but that's difficult, isn't it? Like there's like a grief hierarchy, you expect certain people to be destroyed, you expect parents to be destroyed, children, spouses, close friends. And then it gets to the point where people say, like they were saying to me, like, oh, did you like know him that well? And you can see they're gauging whether or not I have the right to be upset. So I was just hyper aware of that. So yeah, I definitely felt like I was on the fringes of that, and didn't want to. I think it also reveals how little I think of people, because I was there thinking people would think I was trying to like steal Dion's thunder. What a mean-spirited thing for someone to think, so I feel a little bad about it now, to be honest.
Well, it's funny because I used to think, someone would tell me their dog died. And I thought, well, okay, come to work, you're fine. But no, I mean, their dog meant more to them than pretty much every person in the world.
Right.
And they had every right to grieve as much as someone would about the loss of a close personal relative. Absolutely. And now I have this dog, I think I would probably feel the same way.
100%. Yeah. I've got a dog and a cat. So I basically live with two tragedies, assuming I outlive them. I mean, fingers crossed, but
Oh, well, shit, I'm 70 years old. So if I buy any pet now, it's going to outlive me and laugh at me at my funeral. It's irritating.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure what the statistics are, but I might die before my dog, like that's something that we've all decided. I mean, we all get to live in a world where we assume we're going to die of old age. That's wonderful. I'm trying to be grateful for that now, because that's such a privilege that, we get to have, is that assumption. So
well, when you get to be my age, you got to do that thing where you live in every moment, which I can do maybe once or twice a week.
Sure, that's exhausting. Yeah.
But
you got to do laundry,
Yeah, well, you can, but William Soroyan said, beauty is anything looked at with particularity. And so I've been doing that. I stop at a red light and I look to the left and there's a piece of glass and I look at it closely and I realize it's beautiful. So, but I can only do it once in a great while. And the other thing,
you've got to live like there's no tomorrow, but when you're not dead tomorrow, there's a point where you go, okay, I'm going to have to do my taxes at some point.
Right. It's like you
have like the next week,
Yeah, it's like when you put that quote in by Freud, when you're trying to think of your death, you still find yourself that you're being a spectator.
Yeah, I think I had a dream once. Well, I've had a lot of weird dreams while I was writing this, and it was almost comical. I had a dream of myself as a corpse, and I went like this. I like opened my eye and looked around, and then after that I saw that quote and I thought, okay, that's gonna have to go in, because I just had like a joke dream.
Like it's in Tom Sawyer where everyone thinks he's dead and he gets to go to the upper gallery and watch his own funeral. Which wouldn't you want to do that? They would say
it's the most self-indulgent fantasy, because everyone has to be nice about you. Like, and I mean, I wish everyone would be that nice about me now. That'd be great. Wait till I'm dead, then say mean stuff behind my back,
I've never met anyone like her. It was as if an angel fell from heaven. They're not going to say that now.
That'd be a bit weird, actually, if someone said that about me now.
Unless someone was trying to pick you up at a bar, in which case that is one of the lines, I think.
Even weirder.
So the other thing that bothered me was when Chris would have a lunch of crackers, grapes, and a pile of cheese, because I do that. And I was thinking again, oh my God, am I going to die?
I mean, a lot of people have actually missed the point of that whole section, in that I think we live in a very food phobic society. We live in a very fat phobic society. And I grew up in a medical family, and my parents have chosen food to be the thing that they can control. And, all of that made sense to me right now. But when I look back at it, that was just me trying to come up with a reason why it had happened. And because he died of a heart disease, I focused on food. And you may have noticed, I focused on it quite a lot. Whereas there's, half the world's humans die of heart disease. It's very common. And so, no, don't worry. Keep having your grapes and your cheese. I mean, go to the doctor and have your screenings, which he didn't do, which I'm still annoyed about, because he was a doctor. And this thing that a lot of doctors have, where they think if they know the Latin name for anything that could kill them, they're immune. I'm annoyed about that. But no, I mean, I was really focusing. I saw quite I've only seen one it wasn't even a bad review of my book, but there was some snide comments in it. And one of them was being quite unkind about the mental health collapse that I had in that early time. And some people have missed the point entirely. Like, why are you getting so upset? Why are you focusing so much on food? And I sort of had to explain, I was having a breakdown, like I was kind of losing my mind. I'm sorry that didn't come across, but maybe it doesn't, because a lot of the things I say are ordinary things that people hear, which is this idea that you have control over whether you die rather than just influence.
Yeah, I mean, and the interior epigraphs really are good. Like the one about George Carlin, which I thought of because he had 3 heart attacks, then he had an ablation, then he died. So, yeah. And that was over a period of 20 years, and he never really mentioned it. And he had a performance like 3 days before he died. So,
yeah, and he's brilliant. Yeah, I actually interviewed his daughter once, really? And she's lovely. She was great. She looked just like him, and she was great. And but the first thing she said about that was, my dad had a bad heart. And I'm saying this because I know that the natural thing that people look for when they hear about someone dying is, why will that not happen to me? Well, it won't happen to you if you don't have a bad heart, necessarily. George had a bad heart, so not all of us do, but half of the world's humans die of one thing, and always have, by the way. But the reason seems to have changed. It used to be because of fires indoors and inhaling the smoke. And then we stopped doing that, but then we started smoking voluntarily and, diet and all of that. So, it's something you have influence over it, but you do not have control. And that is something that I think, while I did not do this book like as a way to deal with my own grief, as people have suggested, that has helped. That's really helped me to internalize that you can't actually control it. You only have influence, and that's a joyful thing.
Okay, here's a difficult question. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't ask. So what happened to Dion? He was your future fiance.
Mm-hmm. What happened to him?
Did you marry him?
Yeah, we were married by the end of the book. Yeah, I think I skipped over the whole we also moved to Paris, and I skipped over that too. But we were married by the end, because this book actually happened over 6 years. Which is another thing I didn't make super explicit during it, because I wanted it to flow for everyone. But yeah, this took several years to write. So, life definitely moved on and stuff during it. So,
I saw one of your first YouTube videos when you were just a week into your master's, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
How many years ago?
Oh, that was ages ago. That was a couple of years before Chris died. Okay. So I graduated from that master's, went to work at The Guardian, and then that very first chapter happens. Like about a month before the end of my contract at The Guardian, I just went a bit cuckoo because of this massive bereavement. So yes, that was before the book.
Well, if I go back to the criticism that you received, there's part of me that I have to admit feels the same way in a sense. It's like, okay, it's your future father-in-law. He's not your father-in-law. Seems like a really nice guy. He's funny. You really were attached to him. And then, of course, the manner in which he died and you discovered it, were pretty bad. As you've said, it's not a good day. But why do you think, especially since it led to this wonderful experience, why do you think agoraphobia, unable to talk at work, throwing away the sandwich? Why? Why did it happen?
I won't put all of that down to grief at all. People go through grief every day. They don't throw a sandwich in a supermarket and find themselves unable to leave the house. I think here's the thing. When somebody dies, 2 major things happen. One is you feel grief and loss for the person, and the other is that you get a reminder of mortality. And that was the thing that sent me that sent me to a bad place, because I think there's a quote, I can't remember if I ended up putting it in the book, I think I did. Irvin de Yalom, he said that essentially that your culture and society are supposed to provide, I think it said the clothing to withstand the icy chill of mortality. And I didn't have it. For whatever reason, I had none of it. And, you know, what could you put that down to? Well, he said family and culture. Family, yes, I come from a very death-phobic medical family. They are absolutely the cliche of medics who are terrified of death. It took them 2 years to work up the courage to ask me how my book was going, you know, and I could see they were very uncomfortable listening to me talk about it, you know. So there's family. Culture, do I live in a death-phobic culture? Yeah, yes, I do. I mean, the last straw that made me write this book was when I saw that death cafes were in the news. You know, this phenomenon of people meeting up to talk about death. And at first I thought, oh, wow, what a great thing that people are doing that. And I thought, hang on, people are talking about death and it's making headlines. That's where we are. And, you know, that was so stark for me because I'd lived in Mexico before, where it is spoken with a much, with ease. And, you know, that there is this festival every year to, you know, talk about it. And people used to say, whether this is true or not, they used to say, we're not afraid. And, so to, you know, to cut a long story short, I think it was my inability to deal with the fear of death that made me have that kind of mental collapse. That and the grief at once just kind of exploded. And I've had a few people contact me to say the same thing happened to them. And a few other people go, what is wrong with her? What an idiot. So, you know.
Yeah, it seemed to me like it's almost like it was a tipping point. Like there was a predisposition, but it was the tipping point, not to make him seem less of a person or less of a friend or a future relative, but it was something that tipped you over, especially your response, definitely. But then you used it as what is probably something that's going to move your career so much further forward. So why don't we get into the response that you had once you decided, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to move on. This is how I'm going to move on.
I mean, it wasn't really an attempt to move on. I mean, I'm a journalist. And essentially what you end up doing is you ask a question, you have a central question, and you either get it out of your system in an article or you sort of grab onto it like a dog with a bone and you just go, wait, I need to look into this more. And you know, I was aware from living in Mexico that this was a thing, that there were places that threw a party rather than a sandwich when they were confronting death. And then I got really interested in that. And I kept finding examples of it all over the world. And it's very tempting to think of your own culture as the average. You know, everyone thinks they are the average and everyone else is weird. But the more I looked into it, the more I found that we are not the average. It seems to be more common to celebrate your dead than not celebrate your dead. And I just kept seeing examples of this all through the culture where death is minimized and sanitized. And there are words like ghoulish, meaning interest in death, but that is a pejorative word. And I just started becoming obsessed with trying to work out what is the difference between a culture where it's sanitized and a culture where it's celebrated. There must be something. And it turns out there's a lot of things. So I should be clear, I've said before, this is not Eat, Pray, Love with corpses. I promise I did not go to 7 death festivals over 6 years, by the way, just to cure my own grief. It was, you know, it was much more of a journalistic question that I just couldn't let go, to be clear.
Yeah, and it's like, as you went, and as they seem to be festivals and in so many different ways, which we can discuss, but it's like, you know, death, where is thy sting? Or that one Spanish quote, death peels my teeth. It's like,
yeah.
it's like, Sorry, death, I'm not going to really pay. Oh, that's how my mother was. She died when she was 97. And I think one of the reasons why she lived so long is she always laughed at death. She laughed at him. And I think that really pisses him off. And it
Right.
like deprives him of a great deal of power rather than having a fear of mortality, which you and I seem to kind of have. But yeah, she wasn't afraid of it at all. She would just wake up in the morning and say, oh, yeah, I'm alive. I woke up. And
Yeah.
she didn't really care about him at all. And I think that puts him, he doesn't walk in the door with his scythe and his gown.
Yeah, and that's like one of the main things we're not supposed to do is laugh at it. I mean, I had unsolicited messages from people saying you shouldn't be writing this book, don't mess with death and everything. And even that is an attempt to control it, isn't it? It's like, don't talk about it. You'll call it to your door. Like, not only is that nonsense, but it's also, it's like, oh, honey, do you think you have that kind of control? Death does not care. Like, it's not, it will come when it wants to. And I know it's tempting to think that like, you can tempt it, you can't. It's not even that interested in you, you know? So I don't think I've made any friends doing that now I think about it.
No, you definitely made friends in this book. There's no question of that. You know what really bugs me is when, has this ever happened to you? Someone will call me up and they'll ask me if I'm okay because I had a dream where I died. And it's like, what the hell? Just, your dreams have.
Yeah, maybe Google it, like Google what it means. Maybe.
Well, you did. You checked up on everyone. You were taking care of everybody by making sure they weren't dead.
I know.
Yeah, kind of the same thing. Talk about how you did that.
I did. So I, just so you know, I gave a reading of an early version of this chapter, and someone told me I needed to make it less funny. And I was like, no, I won't, because it is funny. So I decided, okay, look, here is a thing that is true. Anyone you're not looking at might be dead. Okay, now technically that is obviously true, but only someone deep in the throes of a crisis of faith would actually take that and think, well, I better check on everybody then. And that's what I did for a while. This was kind of what characterized my breakdown. And I was just stalking everyone I knew online, checking if they're alive, and utilizing all of my journalistic skills to basically stalk everybody. And but of course, the problem with that is what I was really trying to do was control this fear that somebody's dead. But of course, you may check on them now and you may find they're alive now, but they might be dead again tomorrow. So it is never ending. And of course, this is like a perfect metaphor for just like the fear of mortality, is there's no getting rid of it. So yes, I was stalking everyone I knew online, and it was ridiculous. I think this is something that reviewer called me gonzo for or something, but I understand that it's funny though, is the thing. I gave like I said, I gave a reading about this and people were laughing, which is great, it's meant to be funny. And there was a point where I stopped and said, you know, this is a true story. So I just want to be clear, you're laughing at me, you're laughing at me. That's fine, let's carry on. But yeah, I know it's funny, and I think it's fine to laugh at your mental health collapse.
Yeah, it's one of the things that there's good and bad things about technology. I mean, in the old days, you could worry about someone dying, travel to see them. They were worried about you dying, and they'd be traveling to see you too, and you miss each other in the middle. And, with my kids in college, I have the stupid location services. So if I see my daughter is not where I think she should be and somewhere else, I assume that she's been kidnapped.
Right.
And then I bother her and she's out with her friends having a good time. And it's horrible. I need to just delete that location services thing. Or if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you text them and they don't answer within the next hour, you think, oh, we're broken up.
Oh, I mean, I had that with Dion, but I thought, it's in the book. There's a moment where I text and the little 3 dots come up and then they disappear. And I literally Googled terrorist attack London. Because that's the obvious thing, isn't it? Obviously, he doesn't text back, or if his text is interrupted, definitely a terrorist attack. What other explanation is there? And just to be clear, I thought I was a genius. In this time, I thought I was the only one who'd noticed that anyone you're not looking at might be dead. And I was genuinely just like, oh, all of these idiots. I'm surrounded by idiots. I guess I'm the one that has to check anyone. It was ridiculous. Please feel free to laugh at me during that bit.
Well, it's that anxiety that you created in yourself that's probably shortened your life expectancy. Sorry.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But then I got a dog, so I'm hoping he's giving it back because he's so cute. So I'm hoping that it's balanced out somehow. But
Apparently,
yeah.
studies have. I read a study the other day that it says exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in my own solipsistic universe, once I hang up from you, I have no idea whether you're still alive. I never
Right.
will until and unless we speak again.
Right, and that is a philosophical truth that you can live with. Imagine going, well, I better check. She might be dead now. You know, why isn't anyone else checking if Erica's alive? That's where I was. And there was just occasionally this little voice that said, this is crazy. You can't live like this. And I was like, quiet, I've got to check on someone I met at a party once.
I don't know. That little voice that is always there is like really irritating, but it's usually right. You know?
Yeah, it's when you realize that the dominant voice is an idiot.
Is the idiot. Yeah, I know. I've had to live. Well, I've had to live 3 times as long as you with that.
So,
I remember the first time I was like 7 years old, and the voice is saying, "No, you idiot! You don't want to do this," and I did it anyway. Okay, fun fact, and then we'll go into your trip. Charles Bukowski, who you also have an epigraph.
yeah.
He and my dad died on the same day.
Oh, wow.
April 15th, 1994.
Were
Now,
you
when you're
on the day that Charles Bukowski had also died, or was this a fact you found out later?
I found out later when I was reading the end paper of one of his books. I found out later.
Right, right.
Yeah.
At your father's funeral going, Charles Bukowski.
Yeah. You want a big deal with grief when you love your dad as much as you've ever loved anyone and he dies. That's a big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, getting back to you, which I suppose we should be doing.
I really don't mind.
So anyway, so your first trip, because you were familiar with it already,
Mm-hmm.
and I am as well, is going to Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
where there's lots of sugar and death combined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, I went back. I was familiar. I was fluent in the language and all of that, but I hadn't been to Bukowski before, so I kind of like went somewhere that was unfamiliar to me, because this is something that certainly not a lot of people in Europe know, is that Mexico is hugely different state to state, just like America is. So there's a little bit of unfamiliarity because I was not, familiar with the death rituals of the indigenous tribes there in Michoacan. So that was the obvious first choice. But unlike the later death festivals, the later chapters, this was about a year later, so it was still actually pretty fresh. And I feel like, I can certainly see that in the writing of it, is that I'm still scattered and quite bereaved. Whereas later I've turned into more sort of like a, hard-nosed journalist, I think. But so that's the most distant memory for me, is the Mexico one.
When you think back on your trips, does it reignite to a certain extent the initial feeling?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It's more like I say, like in the Mexico one, I was in a very raw state. And it's quite weird reading about yourself in that way, because I think the kindest response you can have is wanting to take care of that person, and sort of say it's going to be okay. But yes, I remember very clearly just how devastated I was, because at this point, remember, I didn't know what the book was going to be. I knew I was doing something, and I think at this point, I still think it would be Eat, Pray, Love with Corpses. I think I thought perhaps this was a way to help with grief, and it was while I was in Mexico that I realized it definitely isn't. Because you just feel like an outsider, or I certainly did, and also don't forget, I'm visiting a lot of places where these are people sincerely held beliefs, which is a weird place to be for an atheist, which, I am, and it's quite a common thing to be here in Western Europe. So, that was really strange as well, because I felt like I was surrounded by people who really, really, truly, literally believed that their dead were coming back to visit them this night. And I just couldn't believe that. And it was a long time before I would realize how far from the point that is, literally believing they're coming back. It was later that I realized that you give yourself, your mind, time and space. You carve out this time to think about your dead loved one, because grief does not heal like a cut. It comes in waves. So you give yourself a little space to deal with it. And you give yourself space to deal with mortality itself as well, which we do not, our culture is very much that you only deal with it when you have to. And when do you have to? It's when you're dying or when someone else is dying or has died. So essentially your highest point of trauma. Good idea, guys. Definitely train for the marathon when you have a broken ankle. It's dumb. So yes, at that point, I still, I guess that's another reason it seems like such a distant memory, because I was bereaved and I still had these ridiculous notions of death festivals being something you do to heal. And that's not quite how it works. It's more about having time and space to consider that person and the fact that you yourself are going to die. And so
it's funny, but it's not funny, but it's characteristic of you, because of the other pieces that you've written that I've read, that you can't help being funny. It's just something you are. And so like when you talk to a story about you're in the bus and you go to the wrong house, it's really funny, but am I supposed to be, it's really funny. And no matter what you say, the whole book is funny.
Thank you. I'm glad about that, because people expect it to be really gloomy, and it's not. And also that Day of the Dead tour was one disaster after another.
I know.
I still remember I cut a few disasters because it was just going on too long. It was very funny, but yes, we did go to the wrong house for dinner, and these two old ladies were horrified, thinking they would have to cook for 45 people. I mean, it was madness. It was very funny.
Yeah, there was all modes of transportation that led to difficult situations. And then after Mexico, I mean, you were familiar with Mexico, but you had, say, Nepal, you had no idea when you went there. Well, how did you figure all the logistics of this out?
Oh, I mean, it was a lot of work. The logistics of it. I mean, for example, with Madagascar, I was emailing with a tour company literally 2 years before I went out there. We started emailing, because with those I had to get these weren't even public festivals. They were each family. So I had to ask around and get a family to invite me. So I started really early. So with Nepal, I think Nepal was a real stroke of luck. I booked like a tour guide who could take me through, the Death Festival. And that was Junu, who was the second tour guide I had. And the first one I just got chatting to on the street, and he ended up being the star of the chapter. That was Sandeep. He was fantastic. And that was completely because I like talking to people, and, I got chatting to him, and he just happened to be a tour guide. He happened to be bored out of his mind because it wasn't ever a season yet. And he ended up telling me not just stuff about Nepal and the Death Festival and the death culture. He told me about his own life and his own, stories. That was a stroke of enormous good fortune to have met Sandeep. That was great.
This is horrible to say, but when you did that first paragraph where you met him, I thought, oh, she's going to fall in love with him and abandon Dion.
I think, if it was fiction, who knows, maybe that would have happened. But unfortunately, this is nonfiction where things really aren't that interesting most of the time. But no, he was great. We're still friends on Facebook.
Yeah, it was funny. That first paragraph was like, your eyes, almost like your eyes locked. You began
No, it was not a romantic moment at all. I was jet lagged. I don't know what was going on. I was like, huh? What? Oh, hi. No.
He was really good because he almost kind of shared, there were situations in your conversations where he was going, oh yeah, I know, that's not right. Almost as if he was experiencing it with you to a certain extent. Anyway, I thought so.
Definitely, because I was telling him how things are where I'm from, and that, you know, that's a journalistic tactic, to be honest, and it's one that is now ingrained in the way I talk. But if you want someone to talk to you, if you frame a question in a way that begs correction, people will talk and talk and talk. So even something as simple as saying like, oh, so where I'm from, you never see a dead body because professional body removers take it away. And they'll hear that and go, what? No, that's a terrible way to do it. We do it like this. So that was great. And also, again, this is early in the book, and I'm realizing when I'm there, everything I'm looking at, I'm getting wrong. I was, this whole book is me basically realizing all my preconceptions are wrong because they're colored by my culture. Something as simple as them laying the dead body out and they put incense around it. And I thought, I'm not going to assume, I'm just going to ask. And every time I asked, it was not what I thought. I thought that was to disguise the smell of a dead body. And he said, no, it's to give the dead person the scent. It's a way of saying we still care about you. And I was like, would you look at that? Every time I see fear, it turns out it's all motivated by love. So that was, that was really enlightening. And it sort of taught me early on to just ask questions constantly. Essentially, I mean, this is advice I give to young journalists. It is fine to look like an idiot, because you probably are.
Well, it's like I read this book called Quiet about introverts. And there's extroverted introverts, and the idea is in a negotiation. Yeah, an introvert's going to be quiet, which means that he or she is going to be hearing every other stupid person says about how great they are, how much money they have, and you learn more than anybody else in the room. And my son, I practiced law for about 40 years, and my son gave me the advice just out of the blue. He said, in depositions, if you don't get an answer you like, say one of two things. Say, how so? Mm-hmm. Or say, could you be more specific? Yeah. And I started doing those two things, and it makes a big difference. People want to tell you that.
Yeah, silence and begging correction, basically. Like, if I have a reticent interviewee, I might say, instead of saying like, did you like him? I'll say, so you didn't like him then? And they're so much more like people don't like telling you things, but they love to correct you. So my mother always said, like, if you listen to people long enough, they'll tell you everything you need to know. I know that sounds sinister, like you're trying to catch them out, but it was, and finding people fascinating, which is not difficult when you're going all over the world, really helps, because I couldn't believe the things people would volunteer about. He told me about the experience of like burning his mother's corpse and everything, and like really like personal stuff, and the way people all over the world just gave me that information and stuff was just, it was a real privilege.
Yeah. There's people who just don't like gaps in conversation. They have to fill the space. And those are the best people to interview.
We hate silence here. People think we love talking about the weather. Why would we love talking about the weather? Oh, it's raining again. That's not interesting. We're just trying to find something that we definitely have in common, because then there won't be silence, because silence is torture. So I know those people. Yeah.
That's why, I've always wondered about the British carrying umbrellas. Obviously, it's raining a lot, so you carry umbrellas. And I really love very thin British umbrellas. But my problem is I've lost literally hundreds of umbrellas, but you can't lose them because they're with you. They're almost.
I lose mine all the time. I use it to get them. I've donated them to taxis, buses. I would hate to see my monthly umbrella expense. Now it's a great one where you press a button and it goes, it's fabulous. So if I lose that, I'll be heartbroken.
Yeah, I have one like that I'm afraid I'll lose it so much that I don't use it.
Yeah. Yeah, been there.
Keep it covered with its little cover, its little condom, and that's the way it stays. Okay, so that's Nepal, although we didn't really talk. But basically, Nepal is the procession of people who have lost people that year. So it's like, that's how it works there. Whereas juxtaposed with that would be the next trip, which would be Sicily, I guess.
Right.
And there, it's a completely that's what's so interesting about the book. Each of them do the celebration, which is what you call it, in a completely different way. There's the presents like there is in China too. Hey, wait a minute. So, oh, that's Sicily. Yeah. So there's presents that are left by the dead relatives for
the children. Exactly. Much like you or I, when we were kids, would wake up to presents from Santa, except they're left by their dead relatives and they're hidden around the house. And this, I was just so intrigued by this. First of all, because it was one of very few death festivals I could find in Europe. But second, because it was so overtly to give children a way of talking about their dead. And the way I grew up was when you mentioned someone you knew that had died, it was almost obligatory that you had to all go silent, look at the floor, and then someone would whisper, very sad. And that was it. And that's all, you know, it was like an awkward moment. And even at the time, I remember thinking, is that it? So when I'm dead, all you're going to note is my absence? This is horrendous. And then I learned about the Festa dei Morti, where they have this treasure hunt. And as a result, they can just mention their dead because they say, yeah, granddad got me a bike. And I just remember feeling so envious. And yeah, I just thought that was, yeah, that was fabulous, and something that I wish I'd grown up with myself, to have that kind of association with the dead.
And even more so in England, you know, what I really get sick of is people saying they've passed away, they're no longer with us. Well, no, yeah. It's because they're dead.
Yeah, go on Instagram. There's an account called They Didn't Die, and it just posts euphemisms for you know, that they read in obituaries, and some of them are ridiculous. But yeah, they never. I think at The Guardian, we've actually got in the style guide that we have to say they died. Not they passed, not they, you know, they've gone to heaven, they're with Jesus. None of that, just died, you know, avoid confusion.
I always do. If they say that, I go, you mean they died, right?
They died, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then once again, you've boxed them in. They have to admit it.
Yeah, and they don't want to, because you're making them think about death and finality. And this is, remember, there's always two things going on when you lose somebody, and it's that second one that sent me crazy, that really people have a lot of difficulty with. So yeah, I'm hyper aware of that now.
And the other thing too is me talking again, is when people, when they leave my bookstore and they say take care, I'll say no.
That's great. I'm going to do that. No.
Yeah, or they say safe travels. Or the worst is if you're in an airport buying something at a kiosk and they say, have a nice flight, and you go, you too. Well, they're in the kiosk.
I'm always like, it's not up to me.
Or have a blessed day. As an atheist, yeah, likewise, say have a blessed day. No, I'm not playing it.
No, people
so this is, I do have
I've never had anyone say have a blessed day to me. Is that what people say there? That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Just not something anyone would say.
Yeah, essentially they're trying to proselytize or
yeah.
No, and I have the luxury in my bookstore of being able to kick people out, you know, because I just have the luxury of being able to do that.
Yeah.
I say, if you leave the bookstore, I'll give you $20.
Wait, you broke up. If you leave the bookstore, you'll give them what?
And it works. Okay, Thailand. I'm sorry, we lost each other for a second. What was it you said? What did you say?
I said, if you leave the bookstore, you'll do what?
Give them $20.
And do you?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really expensive.
Well, that's why I say I have the luxury of being able to do it. So I can pretty much do anything I want.
Yeah.
And, you know, like one guy walked around my bookstore for 40 minutes and he didn't buy anything. And I said to him, what the hell's wrong with you? He goes, well, I didn't see anything that I was interested in. I'm going, it's kind of impossible unless you can't read.
Yeah. You're in the wrong store. What are you looking for?
Yeah, oh, people come in, they go, is this the hair salon? I go, yeah. All right, let's move on before I do this. Okay, Thailand. You went to Thailand, but that's because you had relatives there, right?
Yeah. My dad lives there, yeah. I originally got in touch with him to ask him about the Chinese Death Festival, because he was a travel agent. I know he was actually born in China, and I thought he'd know. And he just said, like, what are you talking? We celebrate this every year, like, because my stepmother's half Chinese, and I'd completely forgotten, because he'd always sent me the video, the pictures and stuff, and I just never put it together, because I was a teenager when he sent me those pictures and I wasn't paying any attention. So yeah, I suddenly realized it made way more sense to go and do this one with family. So it was a very different trip, because I wasn't on my own. Dion came with me, and yeah, it was entirely different. And because later I was in Japan so alone, they felt really juxtaposed to me, this family versus totally alone, on a different time schedule to everyone I loved. It was very strange.
Talk about the paper money.
Yeah, the paper money. So this is a belief in many parts of Asia, actually, that the way to give a gift to a dead person is to burn a paper version of it. So this came originally from China, who one Chinese studies scholar said that, burning paper money for the dead, it was because they thought you'd need to bribe a judge in heaven, because only in the mind of the Chinese is heaven this giant bureaucracy where that might happen. But of course,
happen here.
Innovation happened and stuff, so people started burning paper versions of all sorts of things. Paper, now it's like paper iPads, paper phones, paper clawfoot baths, paper mansions. You can get like these huge, it's almost like a doll's house, but it's made of paper, and it costs like the equivalent of like $200, and then they just burn it, and it's like, there you go, Dad, have a lovely house to live in up there. And I don't know what they think heaven is. I feel like you'd get a house, I don't know, but yeah, so that's that's a huge part of it, is this moment. And again, it's this moment where you can carve out a space to, it's like an outlet for love. When someone dies, your love doesn't go anywhere. You've still got it, but you can't do anything with it. You can't take care of them. You can't tell them. So I think it's just such a beautiful little way of, even if you don't believe it's literally getting to them, it's a way of saying, like, here you go, I still care about you. It's some way, it's somewhere for your love to go, so yeah, I really loved that bit. And some of the things that we burned were hilarious. I mean, but my stepmother Ek, her mother really was quite upset the first year they burned a cell phone. She went to her daughter and said, your father never called me from heaven. And she was genuinely unhappy about it, and it's become like this family joke. There's this moment where they take out all the stuff, and my dad was like, did you bring a charger this year? Because that was what they came up with. It's like, oh, we didn't burn a charger. So cute. And I saw her, she laughed, but I don't know, I still think she's kind of hoping he'll call. So I don't know, I guess some people believe it literally a little bit.
When I was in Shanghai, I saw an entire store devoted to this stuff, and I was by myself, so I had no idea. I just thought, these are cute.
Right.
Maybe I'll get some for the kids, but I had no idea that was what it was for. Yeah. As you did this, did you ever, were you suspending your disbelief? Did you honestly believe, and is it true, that for the most part, these people, all of the people around the world, actually believe in these festivals?
I don't think so. No, I got the impression that, I think for some people it's absolutely literal and they believe it. Like, certainly I got the sense in Madagascar, quite a lot of people very much believe that their ancestors, like the ones in Madagascar and Tanah Toraja in Indonesia, these are places where when you die, rather than here where you lose all your power, there, when you die, gain it. Suddenly, if you want to pray for good health, you pray to your ancestors. They'll sort it out with God. They can give you a bad harvest. This is the thing, if you piss them off, you could really get punished for it. And there, I really sensed that a lot of people totally believed it. My guide, Eric, did not. But it's partly, it's interesting how much it's tied up in how you're seen in society. So some of them, for example, like the Death Festival in Madagascar, it's extremely expensive. So some families just do kind of like a little one day thing. And for others, that's just not acceptable because they cannot risk a bad harvest. So I think a lot of people really do believe it literally, but plenty of people were just doing it for so many other reasons, for the symbolism of it, for the family gathering of it. And I think just because they live in a culture where it would be weird to never think about or do anything for the dead. The way it's kind of weird here if you do nothing for Christmas, even if you're not a Christian, you still see the family and you still get gifts and buy gifts and stuff, so that's kind of that's the sense I got.
I never thought of it that way, but they're also exhuming, they're digging their family out of the ground too. I mean, that's fairly extreme.
It is for us, where we've been imbued with a total terror of the corpse. I've never got out of anybody why we're so afraid of corpses. They'll say something about health and hygiene, and I'll go, oh, right, what things can you catch from a corpse? And they go, because it's pretty much nothing. There's a couple of things. Ebola, not really a problem in Crouch End, London. You know what I mean? So it's a cultural thing that we assume is an evolutionary thing, but it isn't. So but there they would say it is super weird and extreme to not dig them up and give them a new clothes and stuff, because how disrespectful. You leave them to rot in the ground and you never take care of them again. Wow, don't you love them? So they would say it's extreme what we do. It's like, wow, you're so afraid that you just leave them alone forever. So it's just a different way of looking at very much the same thing. We say rest in peace. The idea of digging up a corpse is extremely disrespectful because they're resting. You're not supposed to, disturb the resting place. And yet when you look underneath the layers of those beliefs, it's the same thing, which is that these people are important and they need to be, well, there's kind of like, if you look at how much there is in terms of fear versus love, like I think over here it's a little bit more fear and there's a lot more love in a lot of places that I went. Generally, in places where your power increases after death, the corpse is invited to the party. When your power decreases after death, you look away from the corpse, but you say really nice things about the people and you kind of big them up as much as you can because they've been demoted as far as we're concerned. But underneath it all, we all feel exactly the same. We've just kind of culturally kind of gone off in our own directions.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the feelings are the same.
Yeah.
The celebration or the mourning is the difference. But yeah, especially with you, for example, the feeling was the same throughout the entire book. You didn't change the way you felt about Chris because of any of these things. Hey, is your clock stopped?
Yeah, long time ago.
Well, that's like, so you'll never die.
I wouldn't imbue that clock with too much power. It cost me about $20.
Yeah, I know. You need to put it, that drives me nuts. You need to put a AA battery in there and get it going again.
I do. You're right. I'd forgotten it was there, to be honest.
I was thinking, wait a minute, 5 hours difference, 6 hours. And then I saw it wasn't moving.
It was right about an hour and a half ago.
It's right twice a day. So New Orleans was much more familiar to me, obviously. Of
course.
And I like that one because once again, it seems like a very happy, and New Orleans is a mess. Well,
right. Yeah.
And even right now, it really is a mess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can't really bury, I'll talk about that. I'm not going to talk about it. You tell me about why you can't really bury people kind of safely or normally in New Orleans.
Yeah, so New Orleans is the most fascinating example of how religions and beliefs, particularly around death, are not just cultural, they are tied to the geography. So what happened in New Orleans is the French decided to take it over, and they brought over with them Catholicism. And unfortunately, Catholicism and what they think you have to do with the body, really not great for a swamp. So people in Catholicism, they think you have to be buried, the whole body. And they believed at this time that you have to bury people at 6 feet. A lot of people still believe this. Unfortunately, when you dig in a swamp, like in New Orleans, you hit water after 4 feet. So not a great place to bury your dead, but they persisted. So a few problems with this. So let's say you want to go visit your mother or your aunt or whatever who's been buried. First of all, it's essentially a river underground. So your aunt could have floated away. Okay, you're probably not leaving flowers for your aunt, you're just leaving it for some water. So there's one problem, is she's floated away. But here's another issue. They wanted to keep them in the ground. So they would drill holes in the coffin and they would dig down to 4 feet. And then they would jump on the coffin to get it down to 6 feet, right? And then cover it up. So we got a coffin full of holes that's now filling with water. And of course, when it rains, the water rises. When a body is decomposing, there is gas. And again, scientists among you will have already worked out what happens. Basically, I'm not going to put this delicately. Dead bodies were popping out of the ground like champagne corks all over New Orleans, because it's just not somewhere you can bury the dead. So what a nightmare, right? I feel really bad for the cemetery guy. So what they've come up with is still probably the most ecologically, green solution to burial there is. Essentially what they did is they built, imagine like a morgue made of stone outside. You put the body in there, you leave it for 1 year and 1 day. The temperature inside those morgues get up to about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So like the same degree, like the same temperature at which you bake a turkey. And that causes a natural cremation. So it was a little bit difficult because Catholics believed you shouldn't cremate people, but they were like, we're not cremating them. It's like nature and God. And they're still doing this. After a year and a day, you open it, it is just ash, maybe a few teeth. They push the ashes to the back, it falls down into a pit, and then the next person comes in. It can't work everywhere, but it works so brilliantly for New Orleans. Now, this was the French who had to develop this. When the American Protestants arrived, they did not take kindly to being told how to bury their dead by these French people. So they did bury their dead, but they put down a slab to stop them popping out. Unfortunately, what happens, and you can still hear it apparently, the coffin comes up and just boom, 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 just hits against the slab. And our guide, her name was D'Artagnan, she told me the funniest thing. She said that French parents, when the kids would say, "Mama, what's all that tapping?" they'd be like, "Oh, they were wicked Protestants, so they're trying to break out of hell. So you be a good Catholic and that won't happen to you." I mean, it was fabulous. What an amazing trip that was. And yeah, it's just such a perfect example of how, religions, they develop because of the patch of land that you happen to be on, which is awkward to say, because I realize every religion thinks they are factually correct rather than just adapting, like every other animal.
When I first began reading it, I thought I wonder if they have ads in Indeed or on Google for someone to push coffins down,
Well, they don't do that now. Now they have these above ground morgues, they don't try and bury anymore. But yes, at the time there would have been a version of, coffin jumper.
And then I thought of you, because I was thinking, not for that purpose, but I was thinking I once thought I would get a side job, and I looked and there was an ad for a person to remove large dead animals from the side of the road.
Oh, wow. Where's that?
Here, just outside of Philadelphia. And
they're real.
And it said they must be able to lift heavy items. And I thought this might be interesting to try. And then when I was thinking about that, I was thinking that would be a great column for you in The Guardian, except obviously it doesn't really come up that often.
I can't lift anything.
But it was like deer or cows. Talk about the boy. If you ever, I thought about that. If a cow isn't available, and you talk,
boy dressed as a cow will do.
And then you talk about, I wonder, and so that reminded me of, you ever watch a dog going down the street sometimes and it looks like they're like kind of late for their appointment? Like they want to look at the watch and they're kind of like, they look like they really have something, some place they have to be at. Do you ever see that?
I do. I kind of imagine in their head there's some sort of like really urgent classical music playing, dun 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 dun, yes. And sometimes their back legs are going faster than their front legs and they trip. Oh, so cute.
Yeah, it is. It's cute, and it's also It also makes you think about your own appointments as like, is it really necessary for me to do this?
Well, I have more of those now. Didn't have any for like a year or whatever, being
That's
trapped in
true.
it. But yeah, it's nice to have appointments again.
What about in Japan and essentially the invitation, which is only good. Go ahead and talk about Japan.
It's good for a week. Yeah. So there, it's quite. I almost at first I thought it was a bit more similar to the Mexican Death Festival at first, because again, the dead are invited to visit, except they're invited for a week. And the thing I found fascinating about the Japanese Death Festival, which is called Obon, is that there's a goodbye ritual. There is an emphasis on, okay, go now, which I thought was, well, frankly, quite funny at first. Just the idea was like, it's so great to see you, off you go. But it's an absolutely beautiful ceremony. I was in Kyoto, and it's surrounded by mountains. And what they do, again, it's the fire thing again. They light huge bonfires in the shape of Chinese characters. And the idea is that the spirits essentially hitch a ride to heaven on the bonfire. And also the firewood, the kindling, is something on which people go along and they write their wishes. And, you know, they burn those. So it's essentially like sending their wishes to heaven. And I went along just thinking like, okay, so this is the end of it. I'm just going to go and have a look at this. And it was probably one of the most emotional moments of the whole journey for me, because it was, I don't know, just the visual effect of what I think is the point of the death festivals, which is, again, carving out a moment to say goodbye again, because grief comes in waves. It doesn't heal like a cut. It's not a little bit better every day. And I don't feel like that's shouted about enough, because I thought there was something wrong with me. Most people I know who suffered a bereavement think there is something wrong with them at some point, because why is this so hard? Why is this harder than it was last time? Am I slipping? No, you haven't got a cut. You've got grief. It's a different thing. And I just remember this moment of like feeling like I was literally saying bye again. And it was, yeah, super emotional. And I have trouble showing emotion because again, you don't realize how British you are until you go somewhere else. And there was this moment that I mentioned in the book where I was like, don't cry. And then I was like, nobody knows me. So I just I like to think it was like a glistening tear on my cheek. I probably looked like a disgusting puffy mess, but yeah, it was. And then I remember just, you know, I literally said out loud a little goodbye. And I thought about ex-mum, who, while I'm saying goodbye again, I know that she's just southwest of here in Thailand. She's still waiting by the phone. You know, she's still hoping that he'll call. And yeah, there's just so many different, I don't know, different approaches and different thought processes that go on.
Somebody
London.
just died.
Be quiet, London. See, it won't. Yeah, probably someone just died.
Well, the other thing about Japan, and then we can move on to Indonesia, and I think we'll be through everything, is like so many things in Japan, and you portrayed it this way too. It's the aesthetic, and you talk about the beauty of it. And I think that's, to me, that was the real, I don't know how to put this. That was kind of a distillation of what grief can be. It doesn't seem right, but it seems like it could be juxtaposed with this concept of beauty or some type of aesthetic. You know what I mean? Kind of.
How so?
You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to remember my asides. I'm supposed to remember yours. How so? Because you talk about the hills and the fire, and it's like, okay, what happened isn't a tragedy. First of all, it happens to everybody.
Right.
And we're not definitely celebrating it, but we are, and not imitating it either, but we're distilling it. We're distilling it to its main component. Yeah, there's death, there's life. Yeah. And why not make both as beautiful as they can be? There,
yes,
how's that?
We definitely have I think we have like a vested interest in finding beauty and meaning in stuff, and not, you know, we don't want to give in to chaos. But but yeah, we're never going to celebrate that somebody is dead. It's more about, I think, what you're celebrating is love. You know, all of it, every death festival somehow came down to love, because I mean, this is one of my my favorite epigraphs in the book, was by a British comedian here, who said that you know, that life is a competition between death and love. Death always wins, of course, but love is there to make its victory a hollow one. And that's, you know, that's the only way we win, really. And that's, but it's also the thing that I found myself, you know, realizing again and again, which is that you don't get to, you know, someone dies and the love inconveniently sticks around where it was, and then it makes a nuisance of itself. And, you know, you see here all the time that this thing of grief is love with nowhere to go. But I went to all these places where they give it somewhere to go. I don't understand the problem with giving it somewhere to go. Why have we decided the norm is that it gets stuck? You know, so yeah, that's kind of, I think that's where the beauty is when is the roots out of yourself that you give, you know, the love you have for people. So yeah, that's, I mean, I say it's beautiful because the death festival after Japan was Madagascar, where I got hit in the head by a corpse. You know, it was always going to happen at some point. Oh, I think you froze.
So. Yeah, it's done a couple times. We can edit that out. I don't know if it's my internet connection or yours. It might be mine. Hold on a second. We'll do it.
Okay.
There. Is that better?
Are you back? Oh, yeah, that's better. Hi.
Yeah. I think it might have been mine. Oh, so yeah, I thought, who was that quote by? I forgot. I know it's somebody famous.
His name's Robert Webb.
Yeah. So I thought about that a lot because it's kind of true. But what happens is, okay, suppose you say love conquers death, or love, again, death loses its sting, or however you want to phrase it. But really what happens is your memories of love are gone. Someone else inherits those memories. It's not that you take those memories with you to death. So it's like, okay, yeah, I can see that, yes, this weakens death. But the only way I can see that it actually weakens is that your memories of this person you loved are essentially co-opted from the memories of the person who died.
I've not thought about it that way. That's interesting. I mean, I think it's just like, it's a woefully inadequate, you know, like as if it is a competition, you know, the idea is that it just like death's victory is a bit hollow because it hasn't taken everything from you, because you can, but I guess that's all we have to cling on to, really. And, you know, it's in the pursuit of that we make stuff beautiful. But yeah, I guess it's all we have. So
yes, clinging on to death versus not clinging on is something we could talk about probably for days. But we've been talking for an hour and 13 minutes, and that's certainly enough for anybody to talk to me. But it was lovely chatting with you. I look forward to your next, maybe it will be a novel. Maybe you will write a novel. What do you think?
It's, yeah, I mean, lockdown was about probably the least inspirational thing that can happen to a writer. But yes, I have been working on some fiction and short stories and stuff. So yes, once I find some characters I can spend that much time with, I hope that I'll be able to get a novel out to you all at some point. Okay, it was excellent talking to you. It was so nice meeting you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. Likewise. Bye-bye. No, likewise is wrong. No, that's like. I knew what you meant. All right, I'll see you. Cheers.